The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late spring of 1882, and Helena Crawford knew before she even opened it that her fate had been sealed by someone else's cruel judgment. She stood in the cramped boarding house room in Boston, Massachusetts, her hands trembling as she unfolded the paper that would determine whether she had any future at all beyond these suffocating walls, where she scrubbed floors and emptied chamber pots for pennies. The words swam before her eyes at first, then focused with brutal clarity. "Miss Crawford, after careful consideration of your photograph and references, I must inform you that I have decided to pursue other arrangements. While your character references are satisfactory, I require a wife who will reflect well upon my position in the community. Your appearance, I am sorry to say, is too plain for my requirements. I wish you well in your future endeavors." Helena sank onto the narrow bed, the letter crumpling in her fist. This was the third rejection in as many months. The matrimonial agency had promised her a fresh start, a new life out west where hard work and good character mattered more than a pretty face. They had lied, or perhaps she had simply been foolish enough to believe them. At 22 years old, Helena had no illusions about her looks. Her face was long and narrow, her nose slightly too prominent, her mouth too wide. Her brown hair refused to hold a curl and hung straight as rain down her back. Her eyes were her only decent feature, a warm hazel that changed from green to brown depending on the light, but apparently that was not enough to compensate for the rest. She had been working at the boarding house since she was 14, after her parents died in a tenement fire. 8 years of labor that left her hands red and rough, her back perpetually aching. She had saved every spare penny, dreaming of something better, something more than this endless cycle of work and exhaustion. The door to her room burst open without warning, and Mrs. Henderson, the boarding house owner, stood there with her perpetual scowl. "You have another letter. From that agency again. If you are planning to leave my employment, I need proper notice, Miss Crawford." Helena stood quickly, taking the second envelope with hands that shook even harder now. Mrs. Henderson huffed and left without closing the door. Helena pushed it shut and broke the seal on this new letter, afraid to hope, afraid of another rejection that would drive the knife deeper into her already wounded pride. This letter was different. The handwriting was rough, practical, the letters formed by someone more accustomed to holding a rope than a pen. "Miss Crawford, my name is James Xavier. I am a rancher outside Park City, Utah. I am 30 years old and I need a wife. I do not care about your appearance. I need someone who can work hard, who is honest and kind, and who wants to build a life that matters. If you are willing to come west and give this a chance, I will send money for your train fare. I promise I will treat you with respect and fairness. Your photograph shows me someone with good eyes. That is enough for me." Helena read the letter 3 times, searching for the catch, for the insult hidden in the simple words. She found none. She sat down and composed her reply immediately, before fear or doubt could change her mind. Within a week, a telegram arrived with instructions and money for her journey. Within 2 weeks, she was standing on the platform at Boston's train station with a single trunk containing everything she owned. The journey west took 6 days, the train rattling and swaying through landscapes that grew progressively wider and more empty. Helena watched through the soot-streaked window as cities gave way to farmland, farmland to prairie, prairie to something vast and unknowable. Mountains rose in the distance like the bones of the earth pushing through skin. The sky was bigger than she had ever imagined possible. She changed trains in Chicago, then again in Omaha. Other passengers came and went, some eyeing her trunk and worn dress with curiosity, others ignoring her completely. She kept to herself, eating the bread and cheese she had packed sparingly, trying to make it last. At night, she dozed fitfully, her head against the window, dreaming of the man she was traveling toward, James Xavier. The name rolled through her mind like a prayer or a question. The train pulled into Park City on a scorching afternoon in early June. Helena stepped onto the platform with her trunk, the dry heat hitting her like a physical force. The air was different here, thin and clean, carrying scents she could not name. Dust and sage and something sharp that might have been juniper. The town was smaller than she had expected. A single main street with wooden buildings on either side, their false fronts making them look more substantial than they were. Men in wide-brimmed hats and dusty boots moved along the sidewalks. A few women in practical dresses hurried between the general store and what looked like a hotel. Everyone moved with purpose, no time for idle staring. Helena stood beside her trunk, scanning the faces of the men nearby, wondering which one had written her that letter. Her stomach was a knot of nerves, her mouth dry despite the water she had drunk from her canteen. "Miss Crawford." She turned toward the voice and found herself looking up at a man who was taller than average, lean and weathered by sun and wind. His face was all angles and shadows beneath the brim of his hat, his jaw covered in several days' worth of dark stubble. His eyes were blue, startlingly so against his tanned skin, and they studied her with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she held his gaze, refusing to be the first to break. "Yes, Mr. Xavier, just James." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that needed cutting. "Welcome to Park City. How was your journey?" "Long," she said honestly, "but I am here." He nodded, then picked up her trunk as if it weighed nothing, despite it containing everything she owned. "The wagon is this way. It is about an hour's drive to the ranch. We can stop at the hotel if you need to rest first, but I figured you might want to see your new home." Her new home. The words settled over her strangely, heavy with possibility and fear. "I would like to see it," she said. The wagon was simple but well-maintained, pulled by two sturdy horses that flicked their ears at flies. James secured her trunk in the back and helped her up onto the seat with a hand under her elbow. His touch was brief and impersonal, but she felt the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. They left Park City behind, following a road that was more suggestion than reality, two ruts through the scrubland. Mountains rose to the east, still topped with snow despite the summer heat. The land rolled away in all directions, covered in sage and grass and scattered pines. Helena had never seen so much space, so much emptiness. It was terrifying and exhilarating at once. James did not talk much as he drove, his attention on the horses and the road. Helena studied him from the corner of her eye, trying to reconcile the man beside her with the words in his letter. He looked hard, weathered, the kind of man who had worked every day of his life and expected to work every day until he died. But his hands on the reins were gentle, and he had called her eyes good. "I should tell you," he said finally, his voice carrying easily over the creak of the wagon and the thud of hooves. "The ranch is not fancy. It is just me and my hired man, Tobias. He is a good fellow, been with me 3 years. We run cattle and some horses. It is hard work, but honest." "I am not afraid of hard work," Helena said. "I have been working since I was a child." He glanced at her, those blue eyes sharp and assessing. "The agency said you were a maid at a boarding house in Boston." "Yes, for 8 years. That is a long time." "It was," she agreed. "But I wanted something different, something that was mine." He nodded slowly, returning his attention to the horses. "I can understand that. I came west 6 years ago, saved every dollar to buy the land and build the ranch. It is not much yet, but it is mine. Ours if you decide to stay." The if hung in the air between them. Helena swallowed hard. In your letter, you said you did not care about appearance. The other men who wrote back, they all said I was too plain, not suitable. Why are you different? James was quiet for a long moment, and Helena thought perhaps she had offended him, been too forward. But then he spoke, his voice measured and thoughtful. My mother was beautiful. Every man in our town wanted her. My father won her hand, but he spent their whole marriage jealous and suspicious. He made her life miserable because he could not believe a woman that pretty would choose to stay with him. She died when I was 15, worn down by his constant suspicion and anger. He paused, guiding the horses around a washout in the road. I do not want a beautiful wife. I want a real one. Someone who will work beside me and build something that lasts. Someone I can trust and talk to at the end of a long day. That is what matters. Helena felt something loosen in her chest, a knot she had carried for so long she had forgotten it was there. I can be that, she said quietly. If you give me the chance. That is what I am hoping for, James said, and for the first time the corner of his mouth lifted in something that might have been a smile. The ranch appeared gradually, rising out of the landscape as if it had grown there. The house was small, built of logs with a covered porch across the front. A barn stood behind it, larger and newer looking than the house. Corrals fanned out from the barn, holding a dozen horses and more cattle scattered across the grassland beyond. A vegetable garden had been planted near the house, the plants struggling but alive in neat rows. James pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and set the brake. He climbed down and came around to help Helena, his hands on her waist as he lifted her down. She was not a small woman, tall and solidly built from years of physical labor, but he handled her weight easily. A man emerged from the barn, older than James, maybe 45 or 50, with grizzled hair and a limp. He approached with curiosity plain on his weathered face. Tobias, this is Helena Crawford. Helena, Tobias March. He keeps this place running when I am too stupid to see what needs doing. Tobias grinned and touched the brim of his hat. Pleased to meet you, Miss Crawford. Do not believe a word this man says. He works harder than any two men I have known. Just Helena, please, she said. I am pleased to meet you. Let me show you inside, James said, retrieving her trunk. It is not much, but it is clean. The house was indeed small, just 3 rooms. The main room served as kitchen and living area, with a rough table and chairs, a wood stove, open shelves holding dishes and supplies. 2 doors led off the main room, one to a bedroom barely large enough for a bed and a trunk, the other to a room that James gestured toward awkwardly. That is my room. I will sleep in the barn for now. Give you space to decide if this will work. Helena turned to face him, surprised. That is not necessary. We are to be married, are we not? James set her trunk down carefully. We are, if that is what you want. But I figured you might need time to be sure. This is a big decision, and you have traveled a long way. I do not want you to feel trapped. The kindness in his words made her throat tight. When? She asked. When what? When shall we marry? He studied her for a long moment, and she wondered what he saw. A plain woman with dust on her dress and hope in her eyes. The preacher comes through Park City once a month. He will be here again in 3 days, or we can wait longer if you prefer. 3 days is fine, Helena said. I did not come all this way to wait. Something shifted in his expression, a relief she had not expected to see. All right then, 3 days. In the meantime, you settle in, look around, let me know what you need. Tobias and I will be working if you need anything. He left, and Helena stood in the small house that would be her home, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of this new world. Wind moved through the grass outside with a whisper like water. Cattle lowed in the distance. A hawk cried overhead, sharp and wild. She unpacked her trunk slowly. hanging her 3 dresses on pegs behind the door, arranging her few personal items on the shelf above the bed. A daguerreotype of her parents, taken shortly before they died. A book of poetry, pages worn soft from reading. A thimble that had belonged to her mother. Not much to show for 22 years of living, but it was hers. When everything was put away, she ventured outside to explore. The vegetable garden caught her attention immediately. Someone had tried, but the plants were struggling, choked by weeds and gasping for water in the dry heat. She found a bucket and began hauling water from the pump near the house, soaking the thirsty earth around the tomatoes and beans and squash. She pulled weeds until her back ached and her hands were dirty, and felt more centered than she had in weeks. Tobias found her there as the sun was beginning to set. "Miss Helena, you should come eat. James has supper ready." She stood, brushing dirt from her skirt, and followed him to the house. James had set out a simple meal: salt pork, beans, fresh bread that he admitted he had bought in town that morning. They ate together at the rough table, and James explained the ranch to her. "We run about 200 head of cattle right now. Hope to increase that next year. The horses are mostly for working the cattle, but I have been breeding a few, trying to develop a good line. The land is 400 acres, most of it grazing. We have water rights to the creek that runs through the north section, which is worth more than gold out here." "What about neighbors?" Helena asked. "The Johnsons have a spread about 5 miles east. Good people. Mary Johnson will probably ride over once she hears you are here. She gets lonely for women's company. There are a few other ranches scattered around, and of course Park City when we need supplies." "It sounds like a good life," Helena said. "It can be," James agreed. "But it is hard too. The winters are brutal. We lose cattle to cold and wolves. The work never stops. I want you to know what you are signing on for." She met his eyes across the table. "I know hard work. I can learn the rest." Over the next 3 days, Helena learned the rhythm of the ranch. She rose before dawn to cook breakfast for James and Tobias, simple meals of eggs and bacon and coffee strong enough to strip paint. After breakfast, while the men went out to work the cattle, she tackled the house. It was clean enough, but it had the bare, neglected feel of a place where only men lived. She scrubbed floors and washed windows, organized the kitchen shelves, mended curtains that were more holes than fabric. In the afternoons, she worked in the garden, bringing it back to life with water and attention and fierce determination. The physical labor felt good, purposeful in a way that scrubbing other people's floors never had. This was hers, or would be soon. Every plant she saved, every weed she pulled, was an investment in her future. James watched her work with an expression she could not quite read. Sometimes she would look up from the garden to find him standing by the corral, his hat pushed back, just looking at her. He would nod and turn back to his work, but something about those moments made her feel seen in a way she never had before. On the evening before their wedding, after supper was finished and Tobias had retired to the bunkhouse near the barn, James asked her to walk with him. They followed a path through the sage, climbing a small rise behind the house. From the top, they could see the whole ranch spread out below them, the house and barn lit by the setting sun, the mountains purple in the distance, the vast sky turning gold and orange and pink. "I come up here sometimes," James said, "when I need to think or when I need to remember why I am doing this." Helena stood beside him, the wind pulling strands of hair from her braid. "It is beautiful." "Yes." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I want you to know if you have changed your mind, if you want to go back to Boston, I will pay for your ticket. No hard feelings. I would rather you go now than stay and be miserable." She turned to look at him fully. The setting sun lit his profile, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the slight crook in his nose that suggested it had been broken once. He looked worried, she realized. This hard, weathered man was actually worried that she might leave. "I am not going anywhere," she said firmly. "I want this life, James. I want to build something that matters, with someone who sees me as more than a plain face and capable hands. You make me feel like I could be enough, just as I am. Why would I walk away from that?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and his expression was so open and vulnerable that her breath caught. "Your face is not plain," he said quietly. "That is what everyone says, but they are wrong. You have the most honest eyes I have ever seen, and when you smile, which is not often enough, it changes your whole face. You are strong and smart, and you do not quit. That is beautiful to me, more beautiful than any painted doll could be." Helena felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back. "No one has ever said anything like that to me before. Then everyone else was a fool." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were rough but gentle. "I know this is fast. I know we barely know each other. But I want to make this work, Helena. I want to try." "So do I," she whispered. They stood there as the sun sank below the mountains and the first stars appeared, not touching except for that one strand of hair, but something shifted between them, settling into place like a key in a lock. The wedding took place in Park City's small church, a simple wooden building with a cross above the door and benches worn smooth by years of use. The preacher was a circuit rider named Reverend Coleman, a thin man with kind eyes who smelled of horse and dust from his travels. Tobias stood as witness, along with Mary Johnson, who had indeed ridden over the day before and had immediately taken Helena under her wing. Mary was a comfortable woman in her 40s with a round, weathered face and hands that never stopped moving. She had brought Helena a dress for the wedding, altered from one of her own, a deep blue calico that actually fit Helena's tall frame. "You cannot get married in a work dress," Mary had declared, and would hear no arguments. Helena stood beside James in the borrowed blue dress, her hair braided and coiled at the nape of her neck, and listened to Reverend Coleman recite the marriage vows. When it came time to speak, her voice was steady. "I, Helena Crawford, take you, James Xavier, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." James's voice was equally steady, his blue eyes never leaving hers. "I, James Xavier, take you, Helena Crawford, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." The ring James slipped onto her finger was simple gold, slightly too large, but it felt substantial and real. When Reverend Coleman pronounced them husband and wife, James leaned in and kissed her gently, briefly, a promise of things to come. Afterward, they had dinner at the hotel in Park City, a celebration that included Tobias, Mary and her husband Robert, and a few other ranchers from the area who James knew. Helena sat beside her new husband and felt the strangeness of it, the weight of the ring on her finger, the way James's thigh pressed against hers under the table. Mary leaned over at one point and squeezed Helena's hand. "You did good, honey. James is a fine man, hardworking and fair. You will be happy here." Helena hoped she was right. They drove back to the ranch as the afternoon was fading toward evening, the wagon rattling over the rough road, neither of them speaking much. When they arrived, Tobias made himself scarce, heading to the bunkhouse with a knowing look that made Helena's cheeks warm. Inside the house, James seemed suddenly awkward, hovering near the door as if unsure what to do next. Helena took pity on him. "I should change out of this dress," she said. "I do not want to ruin it." "Right, yes, I will just—" He gestured vaguely toward the door, James. She waited until he looked at her. We are married now, you do not have to sleep in the barn. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. I know, I just want you to feel comfortable. I do not want to rush anything. The kindness of it nearly undid her. She crossed to him, standing close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. I am your wife. I knew what that meant when I agreed to marry you. I am not afraid. He raised one hand and cupped her cheek, his calloused thumb brushing her skin. I will try to be gentle. I trust you, she said, and meant it. He kissed her then, deeper than the brief kiss in the church, his mouth moving over hers with a hunger that sent heat coursing through her body. She had never been kissed like this, had never felt desire before, and it overwhelmed her senses. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer, and she went willingly, her own hands clutching his shoulders. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. Bedroom, he said, his voice rough. She nodded and let him lead her to his room, which was now their room. The space was small and simple, dominated by a bed that was larger than strictly necessary for one person but would fit two comfortably. James lit the lamp on the small table beside the bed, filling the room with soft, golden light. He helped her undress, his fingers fumbling slightly with the buttons of the borrowed blue dress. She helped him with his shirt, revealing a chest and arms corded with muscle, scarred here and there from years of ranch work. When they were both down to undergarments, James paused, looking at her with such open want that she felt beautiful for the first time in her life. You are perfect, he said softly. Perfect for my eyes. Then he drew her down onto the bed, and Helena discovered that there were many kinds of intimacy, many ways to know another person, and all of them were new and strange and wonderful. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow from its frantic pace. His hand traced idle patterns on her bare shoulder, and she felt more at peace than she could remember feeling in years. Are you all right? He asked quietly. Yes, she tilted her head to look at him. Better than all right, he smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. Good, that is good. She settled back against his chest, breathing in the scent of him, leather and sage and something uniquely James. Tell me about your ranch, she said. Your plans for it. I want to know everything. So he talked, his voice a low rumble beneath her ear, telling her about the cattle he wanted to breed, the horses he hoped to train, the land he wanted to buy if he could save enough. She listened and asked questions and felt the future unfurling before them, full of possibility. The days turned into weeks, and Helena settled into her new life with determination and growing confidence. The work was different from what she had known in Boston, but no less demanding. She learned to cook for working men, hearty meals that would sustain them through long days in the saddle. She learned to preserve food for the winter, canning vegetables from the garden that flourished under her care, drying meat and fruit. Mary Johnson became a true friend, riding over once or twice a week to visit, teaching Helena the skills she would need to survive as a ranch wife. How to treat minor injuries, how to read the weather, how to make soap and candles. The two women would sit on the porch and snap beans or shell peas, talking about everything and nothing. You are good for him, Mary said one afternoon as they watched James and Tobias working with a young horse in the corral. I have known James since he first came to the valley. He was always so serious, so focused on building his ranch. But since you came, he laughs more, smiles more. He needed someone to share it with. Helena watched her husband move around the nervous horse, his movements patient and steady, and felt a swell of affection so strong it took her breath away. I am the lucky one, she said. He sees me in a way no one else ever has. That is how it should be, Mary said. That is what marriage is supposed to be. The first real test of their marriage came in late July when a summer storm rolled through with terrifying intensity. Helena had never seen weather like this, the sky turning green-black, the wind picking up until it bent the trees nearly horizontal. James and Tobias rushed to secure the horses in the barn and get the cattle into the sheltered valley beyond the creek. "Get in the house," James shouted over the rising wind. "Stay away from the windows." Helena obeyed, but she watched through the door as the men worked, as the rain started in sheets so thick she could barely see them. Lightning cracked across the sky, followed immediately by thunder that shook the house. The storm raged for hours, and Helena spent that time praying, something she had not done much since her parents died. When the rain finally stopped and James came through the door, soaked to the skin and exhausted, she threw her arms around him, not caring that he was dripping water all over the floor. "I was so worried," she said against his chest. He held her tight, his cold, wet hands gripping her waist. "We are all right. The animals are safe. We lost a section of fence, but that can be repaired. Everything is all right." But that night, as they lay in bed, James told her about the ranch he had worked at before buying his own land, how it had been destroyed by a tornado, the owner killed, everything he had worked for gone in minutes. "That is why I worry," he said. "Out here you can lose everything so quickly. One bad storm, one harsh winter, one disaster, it is all fragile." Helena took his hand in the darkness. "Then we build it strong enough to last. We plan for the disasters and we survive them, together." He pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "Together," he agreed. As summer gave way to fall, Helena discovered she was with child. She knew before she missed her monthly courses, knew from the way her body felt different, the slight nausea in the mornings, a tenderness in her breasts. When she was sure, she told James one evening after supper, sitting on the porch and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of fire. "I am going to have a baby," she said simply. James went very still beside her, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth. Then he set the cup down carefully and turned to look at her, his eyes wide. "A baby, are you sure?" "I am sure." A grin spread across his face, transforming him. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." He stood up and pulled her to her feet, spinning her in a circle right there on the porch, then setting her down quickly. "I should not spin you. Is that all right? Did I hurt you?" she laughed, feeling lighter than air. "I am fine. I am not made of glass." But James became incredibly protective after that, trying to take over her chores, insisting she rest more. Helena had to put her foot down. "I am pregnant, not dying. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. I can still work." They compromised, with James and Tobias taking over the heavier tasks, while Helena continued with the cooking and lighter work. As her belly swelled with the passing months, she found herself constantly amazed at the reality of it. A child. Their child. A family born from a letter written by a lonely rancher to a woman everyone else had deemed too plain. Winter came hard and fast that year, snow falling in October and not stopping until the ground was covered in white that stretched to the horizon. The work of the ranch became more difficult, focused on keeping the animals fed and alive through the bitter cold. James and Tobias broke ice on the water troughs twice a day, hauled hay to the cattle, and repaired equipment that broke in the frigid temperatures. Helena kept the house warm and welcoming, a refuge from the harsh world outside. She cooked and cleaned and sewed baby clothes from fabric Mary had given her. In the evenings, she and James would sit by the fire, and he would rest his hand on her swelling belly, his face full of wonder when the baby kicked. "You want a boy or a girl?" she asked one night. "Healthy," he said immediately. I just want you both to be healthy. Everything else is extra." "But if you could choose," he considered, his hand gentle on her stomach. "A girl, with your eyes and your stubbornness, someone who will not take any nonsense from anyone." Helena laughed. "You say that now. Wait until she is 16 and driving you mad." "I will love every minute of it," James said, and she believed him. The baby came in early March of 1883, during a late winter storm that trapped them all inside. Mary Johnson had come to stay a week before, prepared to help with the birth, and Helena was grateful for her presence when the pains started in the middle of the night. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. James paced the main room like a caged animal, unable to help, driving Tobias mad with his worry. When the baby finally came, its thin wail cutting through the house, James burst into the bedroom despite Mary's protests. Helena lay exhausted against the pillows, her hair plastered to her head with sweat, but she was smiling. Mary placed a small bundle in her arms, and Helena looked down at the red, wrinkled face of her son. "A boy," she said, her voice hoarse. "We have a son." James knelt beside the bed, his eyes suspiciously bright as he looked at the baby. "He is perfect. You are perfect." He leaned in and kissed Helena's forehead with infinite gentleness. "Thank you." They named him Jacob after James's father, despite the complicated history there. "He was not a good husband," James said, "but he was not a bad father, not until my mother died. I want to remember the good parts." Jacob was a demanding baby, crying often and sleeping little, but Helena and James navigated the challenges together. James would walk the floor with his son in the middle of the night, singing off-key cowboy songs that somehow soothed the fussy infant. Helena would wake to find them both asleep in the rocking chair James had bought in Park City, the baby peaceful against his father's chest. "You are a good father," she told him one morning, watching him change Jacob's diaper with surprising competence. "I am trying," he said. "That is all any of us can do, I suppose, try our best and hope it is enough." As spring arrived and the snow melted, revealing the brown grass beneath, life on the ranch resumed its usual rhythm. Helena worked with Jacob strapped to her back in a sling Mary had shown her how to make, the baby content to sleep or watch as his mother went about her tasks. James and Tobias began the spring work, checking the cattle for winter losses, repairing fences, preparing for calving season. One afternoon in late April, a rider approached the ranch. James was out with the cattle, so Helena greeted the stranger, a well-dressed man on a fine horse who looked distinctly out of place. "Good afternoon," the man said, removing his hat. "I am looking for James Xavier. He is out working. I am his wife. Can I help you?" The man's eyes traveled over her appraisingly, and Helena felt the old familiar shame rise in her chest. But then she thought of James telling her she was perfect for his eyes, of the baby sleeping inside the house, of the life they had built together. She lifted her chin and met the man's gaze steadily. "My name is Richard Donovan," the man said. "I am here on behalf of the Western Land Company. We are interested in purchasing Mr. Xavier's property." "It is not for sale," Helena said immediately. "Perhaps you should let your husband make that decision," Donovan said, a condescending smile on his face. "Perhaps you should respect that I know my husband's mind," Helena shot back. "This is our home. We are not interested in selling." Donovan's smile faded. "We are prepared to offer a very generous price. This land would be perfect for our purposes." "What purposes?" "That is business discussion, not appropriate for a lady." Helena felt her temper rise. "This lady owns half of this ranch and works it every day. If you want to discuss business, you can discuss it with me until my husband returns." Before Donovan could respond, James rode up on his horse, taking in the scene with a quick glance. He dismounted and came to stand beside Helena, his presence solid and reassuring. "Can I help you?" Donovan went through his introduction again, then launched into his offer. The Western Land Company wanted to buy the ranch and the surrounding land to run a large commercial cattle operation. They were offering more money than Helena had ever imagined, enough to buy a much larger spread somewhere else, enough to live comfortably for years. James listened without expression, then said, "No." "I do not think you understand," Donovan said. "This is a very generous offer. You could buy twice as much land somewhere else." "I do not want land somewhere else. I want this land. I built this ranch from nothing. My wife and I are raising our son here. It is our home. No amount of money changes that." "Be reasonable," Donovan said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "We will get this land eventually, one way or another. It would be better for you to take the money now." James's expression turned cold. "That sounds like a threat." "It is simply the way business works out here. Small ranchers cannot compete with large operations." "Sell now while you have the chance." "Get off my property," James said quietly, "and do not come back." Donovan's face flushed red. "You will regret this." "The only thing I would regret is selling the life my wife and I have built. Now leave." After Donovan rode away, Helena took James's hand. "Are you sure? That was a lot of money." He turned to face her fully. "I am sure. This is not about money. This is about building something that matters, something that will last. We have a son now. Someday this will be his. That is worth more than any amount of dollars." She went up on her toes and kissed him. "I love you," she said, the words coming easily, naturally, though it was the first time she had spoken them aloud. His arms came around her, holding her close. "I love you too. Have since the day I saw you step off that train," looking scared and brave at the same time. They stood there in the dusty ranch yard, holding each other, while the sun climbed higher in the sky and the cattle lowed in the distance, and their son slept peacefully in the house. The trouble started 2 weeks later. Fences cut during the night, allowing cattle to wander. Equipment sabotaged. Small things at first, annoying but not devastating. James reported it to the sheriff in Park City, but there was little that could be done without proof. "It is the land company," James said one evening, his jaw tight with anger, "trying to pressure us into selling." "What can we do?" Helena asked. "We stand our ground. We fix what they break and keep going. We do not let them win." But the sabotage escalated. A fire started near the barn one night, caught quickly by James, who had been unable to sleep. The horse paddock gate left open, animals scattered across the valley. Each incident could have been dismissed as accident or bad luck, but the pattern was clear. Robert Johnson rode over one morning with grim news. 2 other small ranchers have sold out to Western Land Company in the past month. Both said they could not take the pressure anymore, things breaking, accidents happening. It is a pattern. "We are not selling," James said firmly. "I did not think you would," Robert said. "But watch your back, James. These men play rough." The situation came to a head in June, when Tobias was injured checking the north fence line. His horse spooked at something, throwing him, and he broke his leg badly. Mary came to help set the bone and splint it, but Tobias would be laid up for weeks, leaving James to manage the ranch alone during the busiest season. Helena helped as much as she could, but with Jacob to care for, there were limits to what she could do. James worked dawn to dark and beyond, exhausted and grimly determined. Helena watched him push himself harder and harder and worried he would break. One evening, as James came in late again, so tired he could barely stand, Helena made a decision. "We need help. We cannot do this alone." "We cannot afford to hire anyone else," James said, slumping into a chair at the table. "Then I will do more." Jacob can stay with Mary during the day. I can work the ranch beside you." James looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. We are partners in this, James. Let me be your partner in everything." So Helena left Jacob with Mary each morning and rode out with James to work the cattle, to check the fences, to do all the countless tasks required to keep the ranch running. It was hard, brutal work that left her exhausted and aching, but it was also exhilarating. She learned to ride better, to read the cattle, to anticipate what needed doing. She and James worked side by side, communicating with glances and gestures, moving together with an efficiency born of trust and growing understanding. One afternoon, they found an entire section of fence destroyed, not just cut but deliberately torn apart. James sat on his horse staring at the destruction, and Helena could see the defeat beginning to creep into his expression. "No," she said firmly, "we do not give up, we fix it and we keep going. Helena, I am tired. I am so tired." She rode her horse close to his, reaching across the space to take his hand. "Then we rest when we need to, and we get up and keep going. You told me once that we would build this strong enough to last, that we would survive the disasters. Together. Did you mean it?" He squeezed her hand, his eyes meeting hers. "I meant it. Then we fixed the fence." They worked until dark, then rode back to the ranch and did it all again the next day and the next. Slowly, the fence was repaired. Slowly, they kept the ranch running despite the sabotage and the pressure. And slowly, the attacks began to taper off as Western Land Company apparently realized the Xaviers were not going to break. When Tobias was finally back on his feet in late July, he found a ranch that had transformed. Helena was as capable as any hired hand, working beside James with confidence and skill. The ranch had survived the worst the land company could throw at them and come out stronger for it. "You two are something else," Tobias said, shaking his head in admiration. "Most folks would have quit by now." "We are stubborn," Helena said with a smile, "and we have too much invested to walk away." That fall, Western Land Company withdrew their offer and moved their operations to another valley. Word got around about the Xaviers, the couple who had refused to be intimidated, and other small ranchers began to stand firm as well. Slowly, the pressure eased, and life returned to something resembling normal. Helena went back to working closer to the house, reclaiming her son from Mary's care, and spending her days between the garden and the kitchen, and the countless other tasks required to keep a household running. But she still rode out with James sometimes, still helped with the cattle when needed. She had discovered she liked the work, liked the challenge of it, liked being out under the vast Montana sky with the wind in her face. Jacob grew from infant to toddler, walking at 10 months and getting into everything. He was a curious, fearless child with his father's blue eyes and his mother's stubborn determination. Helena would find him trying to climb into the horse corrals or following Tobias around like a small, persistent shadow. "He is going to give us gray hair early," James said one evening after rescuing Jacob from attempting to pet a barn cat that wanted nothing to do with him. "He is your son," Helena said with amusement. "Of course he is fearless. He is your son too. That is where the stubborn comes from." She swatted his arm playfully, and he caught her hand, pulling her close for a kiss that still made her heart race after more than a year of marriage. Life settled into a pattern of seasons and work, challenges met and overcome. Helena became pregnant again in the winter of 1884, and this time the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to expect. Their second child, a daughter they named Hannah, was born in August during a week of brutal heat that left everyone short-tempered and exhausted. Hannah was an easier baby than Jacob had been, content to sleep and eat and watch the world with solemn eyes. James was utterly smitten with his daughter, carrying her around and showing her everything on the ranch as if she could understand his explanations of cattle breeding and fence repair. "She is 3 months old," Helena said, watching her husband explain to Hannah the finer points of horse training. "I do not think she is following." "It is never too early to learn," James said seriously, but there was a smile playing at his lips. Mary Johnson became more than a friend as the years passed. She became family. When her husband Robert died suddenly in the winter of 1885, victim of a heart attack while working in his barn, Helena and James were there to help. They took over the work of the Johnson Ranch until Mary's grown sons could arrive from back east, and Helena stayed with Mary through those first awful weeks of grief. "I do not know what I would do without you," Mary said one evening, the two women sitting together in the quiet house. "You will never have to find out," Helena said. "You have been there for me since the day I arrived. I am here for you now." When Mary's sons arrived and decided to sell the ranch rather than keep it, James made an offer. The land bordered his own property, and combining the two spreads would give them room to grow. Mary sold it to them for less than she could have gotten elsewhere, saying she was happy to know the land would stay with people she loved. With the additional land and resources, the Xavier Ranch prospered. They increased their cattle herd, built a larger barn, added 2 more hands to help with the work. James hired a young man fresh from Wyoming named Timothy, and a Mexican vaquero named Miguel who was the best horseman Helena had ever seen. The house was expanded too, with 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen added on. Helena planted flowers around the porch, roses that were difficult to keep alive in the harsh climate, but rewarded her efforts with splashes of color each summer. The vegetable garden grew to include fruit trees, small and struggling but there, an investment in the future. Helena became pregnant again in 1886, and this time she worried. 2 children were a blessing, but 3 would stretch their resources and her energy. But when she told James, his reaction was pure joy. "Another baby," he said, his hand going immediately to her still flat stomach. "Our family keeps growing. Are you not worried about the expense, about managing everything?" He pulled her close, his chin resting on top of her head. "We will manage, we always do, and I love our family, Helena. Every addition to it is a gift." Their 3rd child, another son they named Jonathan, was born in early spring of 1887. He came into the world screaming and did not seem inclined to stop, a loud, demanding baby who kept everyone awake. Jacob, now 4 years old, was fascinated by his baby brother. Hannah, at 2, was less impressed and became suddenly very clingy with her mother. Helena navigated the chaos with determination and a sense of humor she had developed over the years. Some days, she felt like she was drowning in dirty diapers and crying children and endless work. But then James would come in from the range and take Jonathan so she could eat dinner in peace, or Jacob would say something that made her laugh, or Hannah would fall asleep in her arms with complete trust, and she remembered how blessed she was. "I never imagined this," she said to James one evening, watching their 3 children play on the floor of the main room. "When I got on that train in Boston, I had no idea life could be like this." "Better or worse than you imagined?" he asked. She considered. "Different. Harder in some ways, but infinitely better in the ways that matter. I have a family, a real family. I have purpose and partnership and love. That plain woman everyone rejected got more than she ever dreamed of." James pulled her close. "You were never plain. Everyone else was just blind." "You saw me," she said softly. "You saw me when no one else did." "I saw you," he agreed. "And I knew you were perfect for my eyes. I was right." The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and joys. There were hard winters that tested their resources and resolve. There were dry summers when water became more precious than gold, and they watched the sky desperately for rain. There were cattle lost to disease, horses injured, equipment that broke at the worst possible time. But there were also good years, when the calves were strong and the prices high and they could afford small luxuries. There were Christmases with snow falling softly outside and the house warm with fire and love. There were summer evenings on the porch, the children playing while Helena and James watched and talked about everything and nothing. Jacob grew into a serious, responsible boy who loved the ranch and followed his father everywhere. Hannah was quieter, thoughtful, content to spend hours reading or helping her mother in the garden. Jonathan was the wild one, constantly in motion, testing boundaries and driving everyone mad with his energy and fearlessness. In 1890, when Helena was 30 years old and James was 38, they added a fourth child to their family, a daughter they named Hope. The name was deliberate, a declaration of their faith in the future they were building. Hope was a sunny, easy baby, smiling early and often, bringing lightness to the household. Mary Johnson, who had become like a grandmother to the Xavier children, moved into a small house in Park City but visited the ranch often. She would watch the children so Helena and James could have rare moments alone, would help with the cooking during busy seasons, would simply sit and talk about life and love and the passage of time. "You have built something beautiful here," Mary told Helena one afternoon, the two women shelling peas while the children played nearby. "Not just the ranch, though that is impressive, but your family, your life together. It is what every marriage should be." "We have been lucky," Helena said. "Luck is part of it," Mary agreed. "But so is work and commitment and choosing each other every day, even when it is hard. You and James do that. It shows." As the children grew older, they took on more responsibility around the ranch. Jacob, at 10, could ride as well as any adult and helped with the cattle work. Hannah, at 8, took over much of the garden care and helped with the younger children. Even 6-year-old Jonathan and 3-year-old Hope had chores appropriate to their ages, feeding chickens and collecting eggs and learning the value of work. The ranch continued to prosper, becoming one of the most successful operations in the valley. Other ranchers came to James for advice on breeding and land management. Helena became known for her garden and her hospitality, always ready with a meal and advice for any who needed it. In 1893, 11 years after Helena had stepped off that train in Park City, a young woman arrived on the same platform, looking scared and hopeful. She was a mail-order bride, come west to marry a miner who had decided he wanted someone prettier and had rejected her. She sat on the platform with her trunk, crying quietly with nowhere to go. Helena, in town for supplies with Jacob, saw the girl and recognized something of herself in those defeated shoulders. She approached gently. "Are you all right?" The girl looked up, tears streaming down her face. "He does not want me. He saw me and said I was not what he expected. I do not have money to go back. I do not know what to do." Helena sat down beside her, putting an arm around the girl's shoulders. "What is your name?" "Margaret. Margaret Peters." "Well, Margaret, I am Helena Xavier. I was in your exact position 11 years ago. A man rejected me because he said I was too plain. But then I met someone who saw me differently, who gave me a chance, and my life became more than I ever imagined it could be." "But what do I do now?" Margaret asked desperately. Helena thought for a moment, then made a decision. "You come home with me. We can always use help on the ranch, and you can stay with us until you figure out your next step. No pressure, no expectations. Just a safe place and honest work if you want it." Margaret stared at her. "You would do that?" "For a stranger?" Someone did it for me once in a way. Now I am doing it for you. Come on. Let us get your trunk." James, when Helena explained what she had done, simply nodded. "We have the room and the work. She is welcome." Margaret stayed at the ranch, helping Helena with the house and children, learning ranch work from James and the hands. Within 2 months, she had caught the eye of Timothy, the hand James had hired years before. Timothy was a good man, hardworking and kind, and he courted Margaret with sweet shyness until she agreed to marry him. Their wedding took place on the Xavier Ranch, a celebration that brought together neighbors from all across the valley. As Helena watched Margaret and Timothy exchange vows, she felt James's hand find hers and squeeze gently. "That was a good thing you did," he whispered, giving her a chance. "It was the right thing," Helena said. "Everyone deserves a chance to be seen as they really are." The years continued their inexorable march forward. The children grew from babies to children to young people with their own dreams and desires. Jacob, at 18, was his father's right hand on the ranch, talking about the future with intelligence and passion. Hannah, at 16, was applying to a teaching college back east, determined to get an education before deciding what she wanted from life. Jonathan, at 14, was still wild but channeling that energy into becoming an exceptional horseman. And Hope, at 11, was the heart of the family, the one who could make anyone smile. Helena and James, now in their 40s, had the weathered, comfortable look of people who had worked hard and loved well. They still shared the bedroom they had moved into as newlyweds, still reached for each other in the night, still found ways to steal moments alone when the demands of ranch and family allowed. "You ever regret it?" James asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set over land they had worked and loved for nearly 2 decades. Coming west, marrying a stranger, taking such a huge chance. Helena looked at him, at the face she knew as well as her own, lined now with years but still dear to her. "Never, not for one moment. You gave me a life I could never have imagined. You gave me love and purpose and a family. How could I regret that?" "I am the one who got the gift," James said. "Everyone told me I was crazy, offering for a bride I had never met, not caring what she looked like. But I knew. Somehow, I knew that the right woman would see past the hard work and isolation and want to build something lasting. You were that woman. You have been my partner in everything, Helena. The best decision I ever made was writing that letter." She leaned against him, fitting into his side as easily as she had for years. "The best decision I ever made was getting on that train, being brave enough to try." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple, as the first stars appeared and the night creatures began their songs. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of their children, arguing good-naturedly about something, then laughing. The sounds of home, of family, of a life built on love and trust and hard work. As full darkness fell, James stood and offered Helena his hand. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet, and they went inside together to the life they had created, the family they had built, the love that had sustained them through everything. In the years that followed, the Xavier Ranch continued to thrive and grow. Jacob married a girl from Park City and brought her home to the ranch, adding his own children to the family legacy. Hannah graduated from teaching college and returned to open a school in Park City, marrying a doctor who had recently arrived in town. Jonathan eventually settled down enough to court the daughter of a neighboring rancher, and their wedding was the social event of the season. Even young Hope, when she was old enough, found love with a young man who had come west to make his fortune and found something better on the Xavier Ranch. James and Helena became grandparents, then great-grandparents, watching their family tree spread and grow. The ranch that James had built alone and Helena had helped transform became a true family enterprise, passed down through generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story. On a warm spring evening in 1912, 30 years after Helena had first arrived in Park City, she and James sat on the porch of the expanded house, surrounded by children and grandchildren. Helena was 62 now, her hair completely silver, her face lined by years of sun and smiles. James was 70, still straight and strong despite his years, still the man who had seen her when no one else had. "Tell us the story," one of their grandchildren demanded. "About how you met." Helena and James exchanged a glance, smiling at the familiar request. "Your grandmother was told she was too plain," James began, his voice still strong. "Other men had rejected her, said she was not pretty enough, not suitable. But Grandpa said she was perfect," the children chorused, having heard the story many times but never tiring of it. "Perfect for my eyes," James confirmed, "and I was right. She was perfect then and she is perfect now." Helena reached over and took his hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of decades. "And your grandfather gave me something no one else ever had," she added. "He saw me, really saw me. And he gave me a life I never dreamed possible." "That is what love is," James said, speaking to the children but looking at Helena. "It is seeing someone as they truly are and choosing them anyway. It is building something together day by day, year by year. It is not always easy, but it is always worth it." As the evening wore on and the grandchildren were called home by their parents, Helena and James remained on the porch, as they had so many evenings before. The ranch spread out around them, prosperous and thriving, a testament to what two people could build when they chose each other and never gave up. 30 years, Helena said softly. "Can you believe it has been 30 years? Best 30 years of my life," James said. "Every single day of them." She leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, sage and leather and home. "Mine too." They sat together as the stars came out, as the night creatures sang their songs, as the ranch settled into sleep around them. Two people who had taken a chance on each other, who had chosen love over appearance, substance over style, partnership over perfection. Two people who had built something lasting from nothing more than hope and hard work and the willingness to see each other truly. The mail-order bride who had been told she was too plain had found everything she had been searching for in the cowboy, who said she was perfect for his eyes. And together, they had created a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone, a story told and retold through generations. A reminder that true worth lies not in outward beauty, but in the strength of character and the depth of commitment. As they finally rose to go inside, James paused and pulled Helena close, kissing her with the same tenderness he had shown on their wedding day 30 years before. "Still perfect," he whispered against her lips. "Still yours," she whispered back. And they walked into the house together, hand in hand, ready for whatever years remained, knowing that whatever came, they would face it as they always had. Together, partners in all things, bound by a love that had transformed them both and created something far greater than either could have achieved alone. The plain woman and the lonely rancher had found in each other exactly what they needed, and in doing so, had proved that the truest beauty lies not in the face but in the heart, and that real love sees with different eyes than the rest of the world. Their story, begun with a letter and a leap of faith, had become something timeless, a testament to the power of being truly seen and deeply loved, exactly as you are.